Hey guys, Fisher here. Today we're going to be back working on my XJ. We're going to be ditching these leaf springs, and we're going to be switching all the way over to our 4-link system. I'm tired of the axle wrap, I'm tired of the leaf spring sound, so we're going to be ripping and tearing everything out today. We already got the tires off to save a little bit of time in the video, and we're going to start getting this thing ripped apart and get ready to get everything bolted back in. So since the last time you saw this vehicle, we've gone ahead and done these patch panels. We did shoot that on a video. If you guys check that out, got those as a new product, just as a rocker delete, get you better clearance for your tires as well as the off-road trails, so you get a better departure angle if you cut out a little more material than I did. We've also gone ahead in my free time in the weekends. We've installed the rear frame stiffeners to match with the center section. We're going to be doing that front section this weekend too. We're going to get everything primed underneath the vehicle, painted to prevent any corrosion or rust in the future, just to prolong the life of the vehicle. Today we're going to be getting these leaf springs and this axle out of here. That's going to be the first step. We've gone ahead and disconnected the brake lines ahead of time, gotten the tires pulled off. So everything's ready to be dropped out so we can get this 4-link system installed. So we're going to go ahead and get this torn apart. So some of you guys with the XJ are probably looking at this thinking, what the hell is this? This one was a collaboration between G2 and Curry way back in the day. They actually did a high pinion Dana 60, so we do get the high pinion input here, and we also get this diff cover that tips up and a big skid plate. I got this thing for a screaming deal, too good to pass up, so I went ahead and bought this axle. It's a stock XJ width. Basically everything is going to be just about the same, with the exception of that 1350 joint on there. This axle has a Eaton E-locker, as you can see here. It's not quite ready to go yet, so that's going to be part of our preparation here. We're getting this 4-link installed and everything else in preparation for NAXTRA 2026, so we've got a lot of work to do ahead of us, but it's going to be done by the time we get there, and man, is it going to be awesome this year. Back on the game of anti-seize, this is why you use it. I haven't touched this fastener once in 7 years. Anybody want some lightly used shackles? They're like brand new. Haven't used them yet. We got a little bit of an added benefit with the rocker chop that we've got here. You can just get your impact straight on the bolt. You don't need to worry about a 90-degree wrench or fitting or anything. You can just put it straight on. So one of the most important things that you got to keep in mind when you're doing the Rocklink Pro 4-link system in the rear here is that the factory exhaust, where it routes, none of that's going to work for you anymore. I know a lot of people, when they do this system, they choose to opt for either a dump or something like a side exit. But for us, we're going to be doing our whole exhaust system, and that video is going to be coming up pretty soon here. So you'll be able to take a look at that and see what we've got to offer for our new exhaust system. So before we get bolting and everything back to the vehicle, since we've taken everything out, we're going to talk briefly about these cross members. So here's the actual center section cross member that's going to mount the control arms to the subframe of the vehicle. And here's our shock cross member. This one gives you a shock mount. We're going to get rid of all of those bar pins from the factory. I don't know if you guys are familiar, but those bar pin eliminator kit, these go really well in conjunction with the flag nut if you're keeping it in the stock location. But this does away with all of that. You can use a standard shock, just run a through bolt through there, an eye-to-eye shock, so it's way easier to work with throughout the entire installation process. And another thing that we can briefly touch on here is going to be the center section skid. If you've already got one of the 3-link systems and you're working on with the 4-link system, we do have this section that will run in between the two and protect the transfer case significantly better. So that's a really good option. It also helps you with locating the actual mounting positions for the subframes. So to make room for our truss system and all the 4-link tab mounts up here, we're gonna have to take off all these old axle brackets. As you can see, I've already started cutting most of these off. These ones are through welds, so I have to grind that whole piece off, but that's okay. We'll start chopping these ones off so we can get that all mounted back up to this axle. So right now we're in the process of installing this rear cross member. And we do have our flat belly option that'll run between our front and rear Rocklink cross members. So we're going to use this to ensure that all of the bolt holes line up across all of these 7 mounting points. So then we can locate our frame holes and we know everything's going to line up perfectly. So we got our center section protector here, our skid plate between the frames. We've got all the bolts cinched up. And if you want to go ahead and run a tape here, you'll be able to read just like the instructions here. We've got 12 inches here. And we've also got 12 inches here. So we know this cross member is in the right location. We can start marking out our bolt holes here. We can use a silver Sharpie so we can see it. And then we'll be able to drop this cross member down, drill all the final holes, and get ready to put this thing in for real. Now we've got these 4 holes marked out on either side. We're going to use Travis's good old drill press. And you can do this with a floor jack, bottle jack, whatever you're doing. If you're working on the ground, you can just use the jack. So when you're drilling these holes, if your drill's got 2 different options, a 1 and a 2, you're going to want to use the low gear mode. Otherwise, you're going to want to drill really slow so you don't dull out your bit. So you got to get through all of these holes and you don't want to be making a run out for another bit. So now that we've drilled a bunch of holes in the bottom of the frame, we got all of these 8 complete. It's time to drill more holes, except this time we're going to be drilling them right in the side of the frame. You're going to want to make sure that they're centered just about in between all of the new 4 holes that you drilled so you're able to access the nut plate on both sides here. So I'm going to go ahead and start drilling more holes. That looks good. So now we've got our cross member put up here. When you're putting these bolts in, just a tool tip here, if you actually take your drill bit that you use to drill out those 7/16 holes in the frame and you run it through here with the cross member up, that'll ensure that you'll be able to get all 8 of these bolts in their homes without struggling to fit them in there. With those nut plates in there, it definitely gets a little tight. You can work with your finger here if you got long enough fingers. Get it on the back of the nut plate and get it situated here. This side's a little bit different. You're going to want to rotate the bolts in order to get that nut plate lined up on the inside of the frame. And once you've got them all installed, you're going to go ahead and torque everything 65 foot-pounds here on the bottom. We got our cross member put up now. We've been working on getting these arms all assembled and put together. If you guys have noticed, if you bought one of our kits recently, you may have seen these new shiny silver male ends. These are our new forged male ends. No more weldment here. It's all forged as one piece. And then you don't actually need to assemble the flex joints anymore. All you're going to have to do is spin the arms in, set them to the required length, and that's it. With one caveat. This end, you still do need to assemble this. We don't pre-assemble these ones. So you will have to build a couple flex joints, but nothing too bad. You'll save yourself a couple hours by not having to grease and assemble every single one for your kit. All right, now we've got our cross member here. This is our shock and spring cross member. Get new bolts to locate it here, and the springs as well over here. We're gonna go ahead and throw this one up in the vehicle. We've got our fuel tank gas pump wiring here. I'm gonna put that above the cross member. It does help to have a buddy while you're doing this. Make sure your fuel line connectors are not pinched. We're going to be lining these bottom bolt holes up with the holes that are used for the factory bump stops in the frame. So now we've got our cross member mounted in place here. Just got a center punch and a hammer here. We're going to go ahead and tap all these holes, and I'm going to drill this one in place just so we can ensure that all of these bolt holes are going to line up perfectly. Oh yeah, if you don't have frame stiffeners, you're going to need to do some nutserts on this one. These do come with the kit. It'll come with an installation tool, and you're going to rivet nut this one to the side of the frame and then use those 2 bottom bolts for your factory bump stops, and that's going to work to mount everything right in its location where it needs to be. Since we've got frame stiffeners, I'm just going to go ahead and drill and tap these holes right in the side of the frame. So when you're putting these bolts in, since these ones are actually threaded into the stiffeners themselves as well as the body, you got to be really careful when you're putting these ones and tightening them down. You don't want to use any sort of impacts or any sort of aggressive tools on this. Make sure you're doing these ones by hand. You want to be able to feel if those threads are starting to pull. That's when you're done. Since they are tapped in, they're going to be a little bit weaker than if it were a nut. So now we're moving on to the rear axle itself. And things are going to be a little bit different here than a normal iron rock kit. Since this is going to be a weird axle, that G2 Curry high pinion 60, We had to go with the Curry actual over truss for this one. Just in terms of saving time, we had to develop either a full truss for ourselves off of this one or kind of work with something that we had. So we're going to go with the actual Curry bracket on this one. If you order one of our Rocklink kits for your XJ, it's going to come with a truss for basically any standard axle option. We've got them supported for the Dana 44, the Dana 60, Sterling 10.5, whole bunch of other axle options. So if you guys want to check that out, we do have those available online as well. But today we're going to be using this truss, and we've got this one set up a little bit differently. We've gone ahead and measured out the center point for the truss itself. And then after we've got that center point figured out, we went ahead and set one of these squares on here just so we can get a better measurement to mark the tube. What we've gone ahead and done is we set it to 12 inches here in the middle, and then we're going to measure that out to the side of the tape, and that's where we're going to put a mark. So whenever we do our measurements here, the instructions, we're just going to subtract 12 and measure from this tape line. And we've gone ahead and done that on both sides here, so we know exactly where we need to measure for our axle bracketry. So in finding center on your actual axle tube, we've determined it's slightly off center of the actual bridge itself. And the way we found that out is we actually measured right off the top of these caliper brackets by just butting our tape measure against it, measuring out 27 1/8 there. And 27 1/8 there. So we know that this is our actual axle center, and if you'll notice, it's not actually the center of the pumpkin itself, because one of these tubes is going to be slightly longer than the other, and that's how we actually found the axle center itself. So we've gone ahead and we've leveled out the axle as well here, and then we're going to be tacking on our lower control arm brackets. These are going to be going up at 10 degrees here. That's going to be one of the most important things that we keep track of when we're doing this one, just so we can make sure all of these control arms line up properly when you're going to install the axle afterwards. So we're going to get the welder all set up, and we're going to get these ones burned in. When you're going to weld all of these control arm pockets and everything onto your axle, the instructions actually do a really good job. Off the center line, you got everything you measured, marked, reference points along the brackets so you can know exactly where everything needs to be placed, as well as angles throughout the instructions. We've got this one pre-configured, so we've got a bunch of angles and measurements that work from 4 to 8 inches of lift. Really good suggestion points for starting. That should get your coil springs stacked straight and have everything else where it needs to be positioned on the axle tube. So we just switched over back to the 1-ton XJ just to show you something. The coil pads that come with the kit are just going to be one of our standard coil pads. No sort of adjustability in there. If you wanted to, though, we did just come out with a new stretch coil pad. It gives you an option to go with the centered 1-inch or 2-inch stretch option, and that one's going to weld just directly back onto there, just like this one, except it gives you a little bit more flexibility to work with the rear axle position. Oh yeah, this Jeep is getting these ones, as well as my Jeep. So we're going to be able to stretch that axle up to 2 inches with just the stock control arms themselves. So since we're working with this aftermarket truss here, these are our standard link tabs. These ones do a little T-slot and they actually locate themselves right on top of the truss. But these ones, they're not going to work for this axle application. So what we've gone ahead and done is use one of our WJ mounts. We've butchered it up a little bit, cleaned up all the edges so we can weld it to the top here. And this is going to be how we're going to get our link mount set on the top. We're just going to have one full plate that we can burn onto all the corners here. Even plug weld these holes so we can make sure that everything's nice and tight on there. And that's going to be how we're going to be mounting our upper link tabs on this truss. So the last thing you saw was doing some tacks on the bridge up top. We've come a little bit further than that. We've got our professional welder. He came out and he burned all these brackets on while I was answering phone calls yesterday. And now we've got everything put in place here. We're going to be slapping things together. Got a fresh coat of paint across the whole axle. We're going to be installing the back of the Jeep now. We're just working up final torques right now, getting everything torqued to spec, getting these ones, all the pinch bolts here to 140 inch-pounds. When you're doing these ones, gotta make sure you go back and forth between them. You'll notice they'll move a little more, a little more, a little more. Once your torque wrench is done moving, that's when you can move on to the next arm. So now that we've got the axle all hung up in here, we've got all the control arms mounted, we got our shocks mounted so we can hang the axle from the suspension here. We're gonna get our coil springs installed here. If you're not familiar with these are our little spacers and finger plates. This is our solution for a lower coil spring retainer. That'll ensure that your coil springs don't come out when you're grouped, because there is a lot of suspension travel available in this kit. It's a definite possibility that if you didn't have any sort of retainer, that those coil springs could come out on the trail. Sometimes it's a little bit tough to get these ones lined up. So we've got our coil springs installed now. We're all good to go here. We've got our lower coil retainers. They're not fully bolted down yet. We're gonna wait until we get the weight of the vehicle on there to fully bolt those ones down. We've got our bump stop tube set to a length that we think will work about right. About 6 to 8 inches there. We've got a big tire to put on here today. So we're gonna drop this one down, put some weight on the suspension, and show you guys how it works. So we're just under 80 here. That's pretty darn good. I think we were at 65 the last time we checked this thing on the ramp. So we got a much bigger improvement on our score here. Check out the old footage. We'll put that up right here. It's so much better. Even when I was just pulling it out of the shop, no more creaks, no more pops, no more bumps, grinding, none of that. Just a clean rolling Jeep, and that's what I've been shooting for this whole time, so I'm really happy I did this. We're gonna go take it on a test drive, see if there's any axle wrap, but I really don't think there's gonna be any, so we're gonna be really excited to use this one. Hopefully we'll see you guys over at Next Year Winterfest this year.